All right, today we have our very own Sharon Ashworth, and she's speaking about lawns to landscape. Sharon has been working with K-State Research and Extension since 2011. First as a volunteer with the Douglas County Extension Master Gardeners, then as a horticulture program assistant, starting in 2016. And now as she's the Horticulture Natural Resource Agent for Douglas County. Working for Extension is a second career, and an increasing commitment to Extension comes from the joy she gets from working with all the Extension Master Gardeners and the community at large. Every day she gets to help people solve their horticultural problems and conundrums or create something beautiful, whether to be concerned with a single potted plant or a prairie. Sharon, thank you.
There. Thank you. So can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Everybody good? Okay. Hey, we got it all working, huh? This is quite an accomplishment after all this many years. I need to what? Up? If you could grab the volume on that under the lapel mic, that will turn it up. Yeah, there's a volume key right there under lapel. So welcome, everybody. Thank you. This is this Lawns to Landscape program I'm going to give today is sort of the start of a series of programs I hope to give, and I hope that the Master Gardeners in this room will also eventually give. It's become an increasing interest in the community. We get calls all the time about what do I do with my lawn? I don't want my lawn on anymore, or I can't get it to grow here. I want something else. I want to help the pollinators. We get calls a lot about this. And so what we're doing here in Douglas County and in other counties is sort of developing resources and programs to help people do just that. Okay, so we'll get started today. And first I want to kind of set the mindset here of what exactly is a lawn. All right, well, we're going to kind of think about things a little differently. So there's a lot of course, etymology here, but the one that struck me was 1540s. The lawn is a glade, an open space in a forest. Of course, this was what people knew is just these random grassy areas in the middle of the forest from Middle English. And really, we didn't start thinking about deliberately mowed grassy areas until about 1733. And by mowing, this is not with mowing as we understand it. There were either laborers with scythes or sheep. I mean, that's how the original golf courses were mowed, were by sheep. So that's what we're talking about, a lawn in that sense. Now, but what I want us to think about is more of a yard. So when you picture a lawn versus a yard, picture that in your mind and around your house. Most people, they say, oh, my lawn is this, my lawn is that. But if we think more inclusively about the whole patch of ground that we have around our house, and that comes from Old English. I'm not going to pronounce that, how it was pronounced in Old English, but the patch of ground around the house is going to be much more than a lawn. Okay, we're going to have a mix of trees and shrubs and flowers and gardens and lawn. So I want to set the stage with some definitions. And I'm going to make a distinction here that what we normally think of as lawn, we're actually thinking of as turf. Okay, so basically when you picture a lawn in your head, the fescue lawn that's around here, what we're really thinking about is turf, a turf lawn. So the upper stratum of the soil bound by grass, what we typically see. A lawn, though, what we can think about in terms of a lawn is just short, uniform ground cover. It doesn't have to be grass. It doesn't have to be turf. Our lawn, as part of our landscape, as part of our yard, can be a low, uniform ground cover. So if we think a little bit differently about our lawn. A garden, okay, that one's pretty typical when you think of a variety of plants and a heterogeneous mix of sizes and colors, and the typical garden, whether it's a vegetable garden, an annual flower bed, or a perennial flower bed, a garden. And actually over in Europe, most of what you see around houses, the German word is Garten. And that's what they think of as their whole yard, they consider a Garten. Garten, I can't pronounce German either. So a yard, so in Western America, garden, so it's a mix of trees, garden, and lawn. So in a lawn doesn't necessarily have to be turf. So we're going to distinguish between a turf, lawn, and then other types of lawn. So if we have that mental shift and think there are other possibilities for our lawn, that's going to help us think about doing something else there. Okay. So there are lots of different options. Now, I'm assuming that because you're here or because you're listening, you're already interested in doing something different than a turf lawn. So I'm not going to spend much time on these first two. Yes, you can just improve the turf that you have. And if you improve the turf that you do have, there's going to be fewer inputs. If you treat it right and you do the proper care of a turf lawn, you're going to have lower inputs. You're going to use less herbicides, less water, and less energy. If you have a healthier turf. And there's plenty of extension resources out there. Call your extension office, get the Tall Fescue Lawn Care Guide. Just doing that will limit the amount of inputs that you and resources you use to take care of your turf lawn. But we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on that today. Then there's the low input. Okay, and I have a little more to say about the low input lawn, but you're going to love violets and clover, and that's going to go a long way in improving the pollinator habitat and the resources that you put into your lawn just by letting some of the weeds grow and not killing them. Okay, so we're going to spend, I'm just going to mention that briefly. What we're going to spend most of our time is changing that a little bit. So an alternative lawn, a low ground cover, we're going to spend some time. I'm going to show you some plants. And then, of course, we're going to then talk also about just ripping the whole thing up and doing something wild. But when we get to this, I have to say right away that for those of you at home and the members of the public that are here, welcome. We are sitting in a room full of master gardeners. So I have one opinion. For every master gardener in this room, there's another opinion about what to plant. So I'm going to show you just some suggestions. But if you turn to the person to your left, right, front, back, you will get another opinion on what to grow. So take advantage of that. Okay, take advantage of that. So real quickly. So one thing, of course, is just reducing the area of your turf lawn as it stands now. Okay. So just limit it to the sunny areas. We all know, and I've had, I don't know how many times I've had a phone call saying, I cannot get grass to grow under my tree. Quick things that don't try. You're either going to reseed your grass every year if you want a lawn under your tree, or you're going to grow something else or put mulch down. Okay, so limit the lawn area, the turf area, to the sunny spots. And use it to define larger landscape elements in your property. Okay. And if you do that and you just shrink the area of your turf grass, okay, you're going to take care of what's remaining. You're going to do it properly. You're going to actually get a soil test from your extension office. What does the soil test do? What it tells you is what kind of fertilizer and how much fertilizer. One of the big problems about typical turf lawn care is we put too much nitrogen on it. That nitrogen washes off in the rain. It goes out into the street, into the gutters, into the waterway, and honestly, right down to the Gulf of Mexico eventually, where we have a dead zone with too many nutrients in it. It's a big deal. Lots of homeowners, suburban, exurban areas contribute. It's not just agriculture. It's our urban and suburban landscapes that contribute to excess fertilizer. So the soil test will tell you how to properly fertilize so that you're going to use only what you need and only what your particular turf needs. Okay. So when I fertilizer, you're going to water it properly with it. And for most people, that is in a well, there is no typical year anymore. So generally speaking, it's about an inch water deeply and infrequently, about an inch a week. Now that of course depends on what's happening with the rain and what kind of drought we're in. but typically watering deeply and infrequently is going to make for a healthier landscape, a healthier turf. It's going to be happier. You're going to be happier. Your water bills are going to be less. If you just sprinkle water on every so often and it gets dry, the roots are about like this. Whereas if you water deeply, those roots are going to grow a little bit. It's going to be a healthier stand. You're going to have fewer weed problems doing that. Okay. Another thing is when you do have weeds, make sure you identify what they are. We have a guide. All this is at extension. We can advise you on all of this stuff. Identify your weeds and then get the proper herbicides. I'm going to see if I can't get that. Yeah. Thank you, Kevin. So try first before you spray an herbicide on anything. Don't just grab that bottle and squirt at it. Try cultural practices to get rid of your weeds first, and then grab the proper herbicide and use it properly. So lots of information like this for this at extension, right? So the other option, the low input, the liking the flowers, the violets and the clover. So this is good. I mean, if you even just do this, this helps the pollinator population. Violets host fritillary butterflies. Clover fixes nitrogen, it's good for the bees. Okay, so this at a minimum, letting some of your weeds grow and let them go. And so what I'm going to encourage you to do though is this is lovely. When you see dandelions like this, I mean, it's like, oh, well, of course I'll let dandelions grow in my yard. Aren't they pretty? But that's generally not how we see them. That's what we're generally dealing with, right? That's what we don't like, right? Okay, but just so you know, this is from a 2014 study, 50 different species of insect pollinators. They're just on clover alone, clover and dandelions. It's just amazing. So if you can let a few of them go, let a few of them go. If you have a small enough yard, you can dig the dandelions after they bloom and before they spread the seed. But it is a problem because, like I said, that's what we're generally dealing with, and nobody likes to look at that. So that brings me to no mow May. So this is a very popular, catchy phrase. Does anybody know where this became popular? Appleton, Wisconsin. There is a movement over in England as well. Yes, but here in the United States, Appleton, Wisconsin. This is Kansas. Okay. Think about the temperature, moisture differences between Wisconsin and Kansas. Kansas is not for the faint of heart if you're going to garden and lawn. That's something we're taught right away in Master Gardener School, right? Is that Kansas is very difficult. The cooler temperatures up in Wisconsin allow for a no-mow May. Now, if you walk, and you have been, you're walking around your neighborhood, you're walking around town, what do you see right now in the middle of May? Well, yeah, they're sort of on their way. Oh, yeah. This is 12 to 18 inches tall grass. Yeah, going to seed. Our tall fescue. I think, do I have another picture? Yeah, that's seed right there. That's a no mow May. Right. There you go. Okay. So there's a couple ways to think about this for Kansas. If you're interested, the impetus behind this is great. You want the flowers to bloom. You want the pollinators to use that in your lawn. So one option is the don't mow until May that I've heard some of the master gardeners use. Don't mow, and so then that suits Kansas a little better. So you got your dandelions and your clover and whatnot going in April, and then you start mowing in May. But another thing that happens is, and this, by the way, this was the Episcopal Church out on Vermont, and they had a sign up, and they were trying to no mow May. And we're not doing it again. Very interesting. Very interesting. So because it was quite divisive. I imagine it was, yes. Because it's generally like this. Is it gets really tall, you let your grass go to about 12 to 18 inches, and then you go ahead and you mow it. And most people, when they mow it, they scalp it. They're like, okay, it's done. I made it through May, and then they wipe it clean. And what happens is this. So this is what happens if you go from this, letting it all grow lush and nice, and then you cut it down. It stresses the grass out. What you're supposed to do in any of your grasses is not to cut off more than 1/3 of the length of the blade. Otherwise, you're stressing that plant out. And if you stress that grass out, it's gonna die. Okay, you hit it, you scalp it, you're not watering because you don't want to do that. And then you hit the drought of summer. This is what you get. So if you walk around town and look at this, is this what you have to decide what your tolerance levels are for weeds. So I urge you all, when contemplating what you want to do with your turf, what you want to do with your lawn, is walk around town and sort of kind of understand what it is you want, what it is you'll tolerate.
Another option that I read about, if you want to do the no-mow is to have about 3 gradual cuttings. Don't cut it all off at once. No mow until May. All right, then put it on the highest setting, get the top of it, then cut a little lower, then cut a little lower.
Yeah, no more than 1/3.
Because it said that you just kill all the larvae that you were trying to save anyway. If you whack it all down at once.
Yeah.
But 3 gradual.
With that said, there is not a homeowner lawnmower out there that goes that.
That's,
high.
and that is the problem.
In Kansas, it's no mow March.
So, and that is a problem with this sort of thing, is you come in here with your mower that's only set at 2 inches. So it's just, it's very difficult to do this right. So actually, the advice is really, you'd be better off taking care of what turf you have. Normally, there's just cut to no more than 1/3, mowing and planting plants for pollinators. Rather than trying to do this, you'd be better off doing that. I've also heard there's a study out there out of Minnesota again about frequency of mowing. And they found they mowed lawns in a suburban setting once a week, every other week, and then they waited 3 weeks. And the actual, bee species abundance was greatest in the middle range there, that 2 times or every other week. When it got too tall, and they didn't mow it for 3 weeks, honestly, the pollinators actually had trouble finding the flowers in amongst the grass. It's a very interesting study. Now, bee richness, which is a measure of the number of different species of bees, was greater in the higher grass. But the abundance of bees was better in the sort of middle range. But we're going to talk about other options besides focusing on this. So you can deliberately create a lower input lawn and a more bee-friendly lawn by seeding areas with a mix of fescue and clover. So another option, instead of doing the no-mow business, is you can either overseed your current fescue lawn, or you can create a fescue clover mix. Now, I get a lot of people who call in and say, I want a clover lawn, and I don't recommend a 100% clover lawn, okay? Because it does not do well in Kansas. The clover just doesn't handle the heat. You get to July and it looks terrible. It gets rangy, it falls over, it dies. Then you got bare soil. You got bare soil going through the winter. And people ask me about the micro clover. Micro clover was developed in Maryland. There's a lot more rainfall in Maryland. They don't have our summers. It has not been tested in Kansas. We don't have a variety of clover that K-State has said, yeah, we've done all these experiments. Here's the clover variety that works here in Kansas. We don't have that yet. So the recommendation is to mix clover and fescue. And you can do this and actually in the spring. So here is just, I adapted this from, there's actually a pamphlet at Cotton's Hardware because they sell small amounts of clover. And so this is all going to be online. So this is, so you can take a picture of this later or have it when we put up the recording. So you can plant clover in the spring after the last frost. And I've got the procedure here for this. This is when you do cut your lawn really low. You seed over with clover and you keep it moist. You have to, as with all plants, you have to keep it moist while it establishes itself, no matter what you're planting. So eventually, though, if you have that mix of fescue and clover, you're gonna feed your lawn with nitrogen, because clover fixes nitrogen. So you won't need as much fertilizer and you won't need as much water. It'll be a healthier lawn. But to get it started, so here's like the basic level with the turf that you have, mix in some clover. This is how our lawns used to look before we developed the herbicides in the 1950s. They all had little flowers and violets and clover in it. So we're just sort of bringing that. So the bee lawn. So this was popularized in Minnesota, the bee lab out of the University of Minnesota. And so what we were talking about was just clover before, and I mentioned there were 50 species of pollinators on clover. But another study, this was just came out in 2023, a florally enhanced lawn. So this is beyond your clover. You're going to add other species beyond clover to this in the bee lawn, all low growing, all mowable. Once again, though, this is Minnesota, okay? And they've had a great deal of luck in putting together a seed mix that includes clover, it includes creeping thyme, and it includes Prunella vulgaris, which is self-heal, is one of the common names for it. They also had a mix that included some ground plum. So that's not native. Clover isn't native. Self-heal, it depends on the subspecies of self-heal. There's one that's native, there's one that's not. And then, of course, creeping thyme is not native, but they produce flowers. This is their bee lawn in Minnesota, and it's doing very, very well. So did I say it's, yeah, there's just, the bee communities, florally enhanced lawns are different than the bee communities supported by the clover, meaning there's greater species richness, number of different species. So here's what they have here. So here's that self-heal, there's the white clover, some creeping thyme, and they mix it with fine fescues. So that's something, there are fine fescues that do work in Kansas. K-State has a publication that can recommend fine fescues. Fine fescues are very much, they're thinner blade of grass. They're not like our tall fescue, which is a thick blade. Fine fescues, and fine fescues actually do much better in shaded areas. The difference between the fine fescue and the tall fescue is you don't need to mow. So when you go online and you're looking for that no-mow lawn that they'll sell you in a kit, you know, the seeds, that's mostly fine fescue. That's what they're selling you is fine fescue, because the way it looks, it'll kind of fall over and look a little wavy. It looks pleasant. You don't have to mow it. The problem with that is that depending on what your use is, it doesn't handle traffic. You can't run around on it and have it as a recreation area. So you have to figure out how it is you're going to use your yard, your whole yard, your space, what you're using it for. So fine fescues mixed with these is a fine way to go for those areas that you're not going to be tromping around on. Tall fescue is still the best bet. If you want a recreation area, you need a clear space. You want kids, dogs, pets, whatever, to run around on, play croquet, you know, golf, whatever you lawn darts. Do that on tall fescue. So, and then I've got you can go and find the bee lawn up in Minnesota by following that link, and it'll tell you all about how to do that. So here's what it is. There is a seeding rate. So this is what they're recommending here. And there's the recipe for a bee lawn. Now, this will work. Fine fescues will work in Kansas. There's a K-State Extension publication on which ones. White clover will work in Kansas. You can get that. Creeping thyme will work in Kansas. Prunella vulgaris, that's also ground cover that will work in Kansas. Ground plum is a native that they've discovered, but it's not part of their seed mix that they have for sale and various vendors in Minnesota. As you can see, it's $300 to get 3 ounces of ground plum. So when we talk about adding floral resources, a florally enhanced lawn, if you're going to go with some of these are all pretty basic, fairly cheap. If you're going to go with other native wildflowers that might be low growth, it's pricey. This seed is really, really pricey and harder to find. But here's a basic recipe. And here's another thing. The best height to mow this mix is at 3.5 to 4 inches. So for most people, that means you're gonna have some bigger tires on your mower. Is what this means. So get bigger tires on your mower if you want to do this. And it's approximately I looked up one of their vendors that sells this mix here. And it's $40 for 5 pounds. They have quite the system going up there in Minnesota. But let's think of another alternative for a lawn, low ground cover, things that were going to work in Kansas. So sedges are an option. How many of you have sedges in your lawns? Okay, so deliberately? Or the ones that, okay, because they're the ones that are around that you did not put there. So here's a couple right here. So Carex pennsylvanica. It tolerates shade. It's what we call native-ish. It's not technically native to Kansas, but we just borrow it from Missouri. They just have a few more shade options than we do in natives. So Carex pennsylvanica, it is a carrot. You can see here, it's kind of got that wavy laying down. You can mow it if you need to. It does, there's a little bit of difficulty. It does spread by rhizomes, which is a great thing. It covers. If you go to the, what's the name of the Linda Allen Memorial, the library in Kansas City. Linda Hall, thank you. The Linda Hall Museum. They have great carpets of this stuff. It's beautiful. There has been, it does not spread as well in heavy clay soils. I know I've put this in my lawn and I'm experimenting with it. So far, I've just got it for a year. I've got actually pictures of how I'm converting my own space, my lawn, over there on the side table. So I planted this. Carex albicans works very well here in Kansas, but it's a tufted. It's not going to spread like a carpet. It's just going to be tufted, but that's an option right there. I'm going to put a plug in for buffalo grass. If you have a bright, sunny 6 to 8 hour sunlight spot, you can do buffalo grass. Always being told that's a Western Kansas thing, Yes. But this is my little backyard right here. This is my one sunny spot. I got vegetable beds over here. I'm not ready to sacrifice the vegetables yet, but this sunny spot, that's what buffalo grass is. I did it with plugs. Now, one of the things about buffalo grass is you have to then switch your thinking in terms of what looks good for you. It is brown in the spring and it is brown in fall, but it is this sort of pale green in the summer and it's quite lovely, but it takes a mental shift. Yes, Teresa.
I was just gonna say, both of those Carexes are gonna be available at the Make Plants there.
Yes. So the blue grama is a little taller. So buffalo grass only gets a few inches. Blue grama will get, and the flowering spike will get a little bit taller, but then it's generally about. So these are all under 1 foot. But I would urge you I'd like you to try some buffalo grass. The thing about buffalo grass, you don't have to mow it. And once it's established, you don't have to water it either or fertilize it, which is why it's better, lower inputs, no water, fertilizers, herbicides. It does get a bit weedier. It's not as thick. It's not that turf that really, if you look down at a good turf, tall fescue grass, it's not going to be as thick. It will allow more weeds to come in. But by weeds, I mean flowering plants that feed the pollinators. So this is one way to start tolerating a few more things in your lawn besides just the monoculture of grass. Is if you plant buffalo grass, we'll get some of those flowers in there. So that's another option for a lawn, low growing ground cover. Doesn't have to be turf. Yes.
I was looking at buffalo grass for my yard. Isn't there a thing about not having dogs?
It's not, it doesn't stand up to traffic as much as tall fescue, but I mean, that's
Poison.
no, not that I know of. No, I don't read that. No.
Bermuda grass.
Bermuda grass is an option,
Cannot get rid of it.
but it's not.
That's why we don't plant.
But the thing is Bermuda grass is it doesn't need
Is
water.
it native?
No,
Okay. I don't have to mow it until May.
but it's a recommended turf grass further south.
Right.
You go down to Oklahoma, their extension office is going to recommend Bermuda grass.
It stays short
Because-
and.
Right, you don't have to water it,
Water
you
it.
don't have to fertilize it,
I
it
don't
handles
have
the
to-
drought in the sun, but you know, it works.
Yeah.
So if you can tolerate, the risings, then go for it. Zoysia is another one. Zoysia is I guess what a lot of golf courses, I'm not a golfer, but a lot of golf courses like that, and K-State is coming out with this. I went out to the research station in Olathe and we walked on all this zoysia plots there. It's nice. It's not native, but boy, you know, and this you can cut really, really low. It's nice and spongy. It's really nice. They've got some new cultivars coming out that are really nice. And it's a low input grass. So if you're looking for low input, but once again, these are warm season grasses. By warm season means their growth pattern is in the summer, the warm season. They're going to go dormant in the cool season. So it takes a little bit of a shift, but if you're ready to switch from all the water and fertilizer you're using on your fescue grass, this is an option. Okay?
Brown.
Also ground in the spring.
Yes, yes, also.
And if I can, because I am a big advocate of zoysia, is there anyone who doesn't have other stuff to do in the spring other than mow? Is there anyone who's not sick of mowing by October? Zoysia is your grass.
Okay, so I'm going to try to get this to work, and I have to stop share and share again to get it online on the Zoom. Okay.
I'm still seeing your past.
Okay,
Push escape, it'll bring up your
Yeah.
computer.
so, and I'm gonna do a new share, and I'm gonna share this. This is a new thing, so we sort of borrowed and got our typical turf lawn envy from England. So I'm gonna suggest we borrow this idea. So this is something that a researcher and professor in Reading, UK developed. It's called the tapestry lawn. And I don't know if anybody's seen this. This is so, and so what he has done is developed a way of installing this sort of type. So each one of these, you know, just little squares of different plants, and they're all low growing. And the pollinators on this thing are amazing. And it's called the tapestry lawn. And so here's some pictures. And I just thought that is just really lovely of that. Now, let me turn the lights a little bit so you can see them a little better.
Oh.
Come this way. Oh, for heaven's sakes.
It seems to be on you. Oh. Need to smile, sure.
Okay, so the tapestry lawn. So there's also a video. I won't show the video here unless we have some time, but there's a link to it. But I just thought that was just incredibly lovely. And you can watch a little 2-minute video of him establishing this tapestry lawn. Now, of course, these plants that were developed in the tapestry lawn, we're talking England, all right? So it's cooler, moister, and these are native. Most of these are native. So what can we do here in Kansas? Try to get back to here. Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to suggest some plants. And like I said, remember the caveat. We are a lot of master gardeners around here, a lot of different opinions. That's fine. We all got something different that we want to plant. So I put together sort of what I would envision might be a tapestry lawn type of environment with these. So these are all short no-mow Kansas plants, okay, that you could put and maybe try a small area in your yard to do this. So here's some native to native-ish ones. Wild ginger, I know, is a favorite amongst the group. The Packer ovaveda is one of my favorites. The flowering stalk comes up about like this bright yellow flower, but then you can just cut that stalk off and it's a wonderful little ground cover. The crested eye dwarf iris and the common blue violet, all sort of native or native-ish. Actually, I don't think that one's native. So this is sun to part shade. Needs some moisture. But this is going to be less than continually watering your tall fescue lawn. There's the self-heal, which is depending on what subspecies it is. And then you've got all these introduced things that most of us are familiar with to intersperse. So I don't want to suggest, so I'm going to talk a lot about natives and introduce. A mix is fine. I mean, there are some arguments I'll get into for why you want to include some natives in your lawn, but I don't want to be purist in the sense of flowering plants support pollinators. Okay. Native plants support native pollinators, but you don't have to be pure about this. You can mix natives and non-natives to do this. So here's some that do really well. You can actually see, let's see, bugleweed and the creeping buttercup and the creeping jenny out in front of the extension building. Thanks to Larry Nieders here, Master Gardener, there's a ground cover demonstration. Plots of different kinds of ground covers, all under a foot that you can establish in your yard. So go take a walk in front of the extension office and see what they look like. So these are all short no-mow Kansas. I just took some pictures of what that could possibly look like in your yard. So here's a picture of each of those that I have listed there. So these are all really short no-mow plants that you could put in your yard instead of the tall fescue. Now here's dry and sunny. Now, of course, we've got a lot of these things. If you've got a dry sunny plot, if we're Kansas, we're good. We don't need that Minnesota stuff. We have plenty of stuff here. Now, when I'm talking about these plants, so finding seed and affording seed for this, we're not quite there yet. This would be very difficult to put together as a seed mix. So this is mostly going to be plugs of plants that you would do. So yarrow, of course, now that can get pretty tall, but it's mowable. Bird's foot violet, pussy toes is a great little one. I'll show you a picture in a minute. So these are all great, really low growing, no mow. And then I've got the two grasses here, mixing the grasses in with the flowers. And then here's some introduced ones as well. The basket of gold you can see out in our rock garden in the Master Garden demonstration. And we've got some of these things also in our pollinator garden. So we've got it covered when it comes to dry and sunny. Okay, there's a lot of plants that we can use instead of tall fescue.
A lot of those in the sale as well.
So that's what some of them look like. And these are all under a foot. Yes. Yeah. It's great. Those are great. And not only birds, great pollinator plants. Yeah. Wild strawberry. It does spread, but if that's what you're after, if you're looking for an alternative ground cover that's going to cover some area instead of tall fescue, wild strawberry is great. We've got a lot of that out in the bird garden right out here. So you can see what it looks like. And so now we've got dry with some shade. You know, this is under our pin oaks. You know, this is what people are calling about. I can't get anything to grow there. So here's some suggestions for under the trees that are all short, no mow. So there's the wild strawberry. Okay, wild strawberry. And you've got your sedges and this stone crop here, the sedum tornatum, which is native-ish. And then here's our old standbys here that you can see in our garden here. You know, if this isn't enough, you can mix in with Vinca, Liriope, Bishop's Hat, and Dead Nettle. Those are all good in the shade, cover ground. Okay, so if we're looking to replace our turf, here are some options, all under a foot instead. And there's what that would look like. Mixing that together. So you can always start out small, mix your natives and non-natives. But now we get to the part where you're just going to take it all out and you just want wild. Okay. So this is without regard to height. Okay, so all that stuff I was showing you before is if you've got a front yard, you're a little, where you want something low, you don't want something rangy, you don't want your neighbors to complain, that kind of thing. That's what all that sort of was before. This is where you're going to take some section of your turf and you're going to replace it and you're just going to go wild. So a mix with non-natives or natives, you start integrating natives into your non-natives if you want. And I'll just show you some examples here. So first of all, just some research to back this up. Pollinators are going to respond to diversity. Diversity, variety. Pollinators, that's what pollinators respond to. Woodies, herbaceous, grasses, different sunshade. The more different kinds of things that you have in your yard, native and non-native, are going to support more and more pollinators. That's the rule. And here I thought interesting, 2021, I forget, I think this was also from Minnesota, where they've done a lot of this research, just comparing the cost. Now this is maintenance, not establishment. So yeah, there's an upfront cost to putting in plugs and plants. But maintenance wise, definitely cheaper than you're putting your herbicides, your water, and your fertilizer down on your fescue. So, and this is what we're after. We're trying to support biodiversity. This Lawns to Landscape is all about encouraging biodiversity. We are in the middle of a biodiversity crisis. We are losing our pollinators. And studies have shown that if suburban landscapes, urban landscapes, and our yards are significant support for pollinators. That's what most, I didn't go into the history of lawn and how many millions and millions of acres that we have of lawn in this country and how many millions of gallons that we use to support it, of gallons of water we use to support it. But it's a significant chunk of our landscape. And by changing that, tweaking it even just a little bit can help tremendously. So grasses, you think of grasses, they're wind pollinated, right? But they're actually host plants on a number of occasions for different sorts of caterpillars. And they've actually shown, there's been, I read one paper where there's some bees that are using the pollen too, as well. And on grass, it's not just the, what your typical, this is a flowering plant, but your typical flowering plant. So why do we encourage natives? Low maintenance, but we always say there's no such thing as no maintenance. Doesn't exist. Don't try it, because I can show you what no maintenance is. Remember that first picture after the dandelion where it was just bare ground and dandelion? That's no maintenance. That's no maintenance. You can walk around town and see a whole bunch of that. So adapted to local conditions. Okay. They get Kansas plants get Kansas. They know how to do it. Heat and drought tolerant, poor soils. And of course, less water, fertilizer, and pesticides, which is what we're after. It's lower inputs. It's going to cost you less. It's going to be less work once it's established. So a couple cautionary trails about establishing natives in your yard, because one thing, certainly as master gardeners, we want you to be happy with your yard. We want you to love what you've got there. We want you to appreciate it. We want you to sit in a beautiful yard. And so we want you to be successful in doing this. And so you talk to master gardeners, talk to people at native plant sales, find out what's going to work for you. We don't want you to just sort of, oh, this was a horrible idea, and then give it up. And so there are a few things that, well, not just a few, several things. These are some of mine that I just picked up. Equisete, mostly because we planted them in this garden back here, and it was not a good thing. So this equisetum here, Tradescantia is a very, very popular, lovely native plant. I find it spreads too much for my taste. You just ask around, see what it is. You have to talk to people about the plants and find out how they behave. Whether you want something that's aggressive. When I started redoing my lawn, I was like, give me anything that takes over. I will take anything. Or talk about height. One of the things that happens, so these can get aggressive, is if we got a lot of prairie plants and they're so pretty, right? You really want that liatris, that incredible spike of flowers. Well, if you put it in a partially shaded area, in amended soil, and it's with other plants that you care, it's gonna grow, and then it's gonna flop over. And there's a lot, this is my yard. So I've done a lot of this myself. You can see part of it over there, is I just love the prairie plants, and I live in town under a bunch of oak trees. But I insist on trying. And every time it's just gonna flop over. So, I keep trying. I'm okay with it. I've got some goldenrod in there. I'm learning as we go. Yes. Stand up. Yes, thank you. Mhm. Yeah. Yes, and that's a good thing about the cultivars. And let me say a word about cultivars or nativars, as we might say, when you take a native plant and you adjust some of its characteristics. If you're adjusting for height and you're getting a dwarf version of it, it's still going to support pollinators. The thing that they found in terms of the research is really a mixed bag in terms of what sorts of plants pollinators prefer. And there are sometimes that pollinators are going to prefer the cultivar or the non-native in some research that's been done. And also the research that's done where you're just shrinking the plant a little bit, it really doesn't affect the pollinator use. What has been shown to affect pollinator use is when you take a plant and you change the flower structure, like you take those echinaceas and you make them the double, I forget the term, double-headed, and they got all the different petals on it. Yeah, that shows that they don't like that. But changing, and over in there, thank you for mentioning the cultivars, over on that table is a handout. You can take a picture of it or there's a few sheets of there. Susan Rendell, our master gardener, put a list together of dwarf cultivars of native shrubs. Long list of possibilities there. So excellent if you want some ideas there. So, but you do have to watch where you put them. You put prairie plants in the shade and you put them and you water them like your other plants. They don't like it. They like it tough. They put them in a dry spot and get them settled in and then just ignore them. Another thing you're going to have to decide in putting native plants in is whether you want a more formal or informal. So if you want an informal meadow-like thing instead of your formal garden, this is where you can get seeds. You can go to the various vendors, I'll show you in a minute, and get seeds and replace part of your turf landscape with a little meadow. More on that in a bit. Or you could go for the plants and do a much more formal garden with natives. And we have examples of, we've got a pollinator garden up here. We've got our native medicinal garden that shows how you can use natives in a more formal setting. So the thing to remember with planting pollinator gardens and native gardens is variety of all kinds, colors, shapes, sizes. The more variety you have, the more pollinators you're going to have. So variety of purpose. Oh, yes, the example. So this was Susan and Doug Rendell installation at the Lead Center. So just another example of a more, so this is formal in the sense that it's defined around this piece of artwork in front of the Lead Center. And there's certainly a plan in here for this, but it looks stunning. And so this, of course, is not the no-mo version. This is so lots of different heights. So you can go see what this looks like up at the Lead Center as an example. So variety of purpose, what I meant by that was food plants. So you got your nectar plants, you got to have plants that get eaten. So that's what pollinator gardening is all about, is you want the insects to eat the plants. So that's another, in terms of shifting mentality, it's shifting in terms of maybe the seasonality of the color of your grass, but it's also allowing munched plants and being okay with munched plants, because that's what they're there for. And buffet plants for the hungry birds. So the birds are after the caterpillars. So you want the plants to be munched by caterpillars, and then you want the birds to munch on the caterpillars in order to feed the whole food web. That's what we're trying to do with our suburban landscape now, is support biodiversity, support the food web that we're losing. And then the Jayhawk Audubon has a plants for birds specifically, and that emphasizes plants that support caterpillars that the birds are feeding.
But also, grasses
Yeah.
provide the birds with seed.
Yes, as well. So mix of everything. So you can find some resources for this. There's a publication, plantnativeks.org, that planting natives in Northeast Kansas. We've got one for gardening, landscaping, prairie, reconstructing prairie, restoring prairie, and native cropland borders. It has a list of recommended plants in it. It has a list of where you can get these plants. So that is a resource, so this will be on the web. Plant Native Kansas, those are the booklets. We don't have any hard copies anymore. But that has advice on how to get rid of your turf. If you decide to get rid of your turf, there's a variety of ways. It'll take you through this sort of step by step, how to get rid of turf. We have a solarization demonstration happening next Monday in between the hoop houses, the high tunnels on the fairgrounds. That'll show you how to cook your existing turf and then plant it again in the fall. And now in that publication, Plant Native Kansas, this needs to be updated because this changes a while, but there are a number of seed vendors and plant vendors for native plants. Another way to get your native plants, native plant sales. There are 3 every year here in Lawrence, and the last one available is ours on June 3rd, Master Gardeners, out at the pavilion. So it's a great place to get native plants and to talk with people. If you go to Monarch Watch and do their sale, if you go to Grassland Heritage and do their sale, which is happening today, or ours on 3rd, talk with the people there about what might work in your yard. We want you to be happy with what's you put in your yard. So talk to them. They're absolutely knowledgeable about what grows where. Other resources. So a little further south, the Dick Arboretum, there's the Bee Friendly Lawns. All these links will be available. And a lot of these are searchable databases for all kinds of different plants. Yes. Yes, that's a seed source. Yeah, and that's in that list right here, I think. Yeah, Missouri Wildflowers Nursery. Yes, yes, sir.
Curiously, you've not mentioned milkweed with all this stuff with pollinators and monarchs and stuff. What about it?
Plant it. It is right. There's a lot of milkweed is very important. It's for monarch. It's just one in the mix of things. Now I have not gone through, as you can see, we'll get to that, and picked out a whole bunch of plants because over on this side table right here is a whole list of potential native plants that you could plant in information. There are so many different kinds of plants that you could put in your yard. There's no way I can cover all that is recommended. That's why I focused on the low growing ones. But yes, thank you for pointing out milkweed is very important. And that is, you can get that at any one of these. There's a lot of milkweed. And the milkweed is actually one of the things that's mostly available at garden centers. When you go to a garden center, ask for natives and see if they have. Most garden centers are only going to have like the top 5, but most all of them have milkweed. So that is at least one plant that's easy to get and easy to plant.
Really, caveat.
Yeah.
Want to make sure those milkweeds aren't treated near it. Right? And the growers don't always.
Thank you.
We will have 6 milkweeds available at the plant center.
Yes, and they are not treated
They are
with
not-
neonicotinoids. They are
Six
not-
varieties.
Yes. Sudi.
Some of the taller grasses, I just ran across a piece on miscanthus, the concerns of that. Can you speak to that? just briefly?
I don't know what that, I know miscanthus is it's an ornamental grass, and I don't know what the concern is you're bringing up.
They're talking about putting on the invasives because of the seed contamination in the native prairies.
I have seen miscanthus in the prairies that I visit, prairie reconstructions that I've consulted on and worked. I have seen miscanthus out in the wild.
And
So
they
to speak.
particularly are, I think, morning light is onerous.
Mhm.
So that's something for us.
Yeah, you can see that in our garden too. So, let me say a word about, so this might be your neighbor. As you are starting to think about replacing your turf. Okay, so now, as you can see, this is pretty typical. Somebody who cares a lot about their turf, and turf has a place. I'm not that, but if this is your neighbor and you want something different, There are two words I have for you, edges and signs, edges and signs. This goes for those of you who might be concerned about what the city has to say. If you're in one of the cities, Eudora, Baldwin, Compton, Lawrence, what the city might have to say about replacing your turf. People like to see management. They like to know that it's being taken care of. So if you are able to put an edge around what you're doing, any kind of edge, just a digging out of an edge, edging with the edger, or putting a little fence or bricks or any kind of edge, signals to other people that you are taking care of it. You've got this in hand. And another thing is signs, is let people know what you're doing. I'm supporting the pollinators. You can get official signs like from Monarch Watch. This is a Monarch Way station. You can get them from National Wildlife. There's a bunch of places, or you can put up your own sign that says, I'm trying to support pollinators, or under construction, wait till you see, this is going to be beautiful. It might not be beautiful yet, but it's going to be, that kind of thing. Yeah. Mhm. So this goes a long way. And actually what I think is, I think most people are kind of curious anyway. They're going to see what you're doing. It's going to be pretty, it's going to be different, and they'll be curious about what you're doing. But if you just do the two things, edges and signs, that's gonna basically, I can't say every time going to take care of the heartache, but of your neighbor, but it goes a long way to supporting. And this is happening all across the United States. People are starting to replace their lawns, and they're running into some difficulties and hiccups, but like edges and signs go a long way. Tell people what you're trying to do and why. And like I said, call the master gardeners and they can give you help out. So I'm at my hour, so I want to have some time for questions. Nikki.
Back from the beginning, somebody inquired on the chat, what is too tall to find over 3 inches? This is back when you were.
For the mowing of the grass.
The mowing of the grass.
So by too tall,
Trying to have pollinators. It was in the middle of all the grass.
when I said,
Discussions.
there was that study that I mentioned offhand, where they weren't mowing for 3 weeks.
Right.
And then the grass got so tall it hid the flowers.
Yeah,
I feel like it was.
I think it was before that. That's
Okay.
when they're talking about when you let it grow and then you.
Right, when it's 12, when
What
the fescue gets 12 to 18 inches tall. Yeah, then you mow it down to its normal height, it stresses the grass. So you only want to mow 1/3 of the blade length.
So it's less about the height, more
Yeah.
about the ratio.
Right.
To that end, bag or not bag?
Well, if you're mowing regularly, don't bag, because you want those clippings to add to the organic matter in the lawn. But if you're taking 12-inch tall fescue, and you're just laying that down on the ground, then you could be blocking light.
You can bail it up.
Yeah. Use it as mulch. Put it in your garden. Yeah, it's great mulch. Yeah. Thought I saw one. Other question. You're sitting now, the members of the public, you're sitting amongst a whole group of master gardeners. If you want an opinion, what plants? Now's your chance. Angie.
How do we, grass from seeds we already have grass?
That's going to be difficult if you already have it established. Because you really need to take what you've got down really low. You can seed in. It's a warm season grass, so you'll be doing that in the spring. So kind of like the clover, where you take it down and spread the seed, and eventually it will start incorporating. Now, depending on your site conditions, it's going to be sort of a battle between the fescue and the buffalo grass. And one of the things you'll see is, as you often see now, when you see fescue and Bermuda grass battling it out, you're going to have those brown patches in amongst the green. Or sometimes you see it as a big chunk of brown grass that's invading your tall fescue. So you're going to have to deal with that mix of colors as well. And who knows how long that would take and who might win. It sort of depends on the year. You can see, I kind of find that fascinating, the battle between the cool season and warm season that I used to watch in my own yard. Like, who's going to win this year?
It really does depend a lot on the moisture. Because the buffalo and zoysias will be doing very well in the heat of the summer unless there's a lot of moisture keeping the fescue going. But if you're not watering your fescue yard, and you've got zoysia plugs or buffalo grass, it will start infiltrating. And eventually it will overpower in Kansas because we just don't get enough rain to support it in the summer.
Another thing that's available is they've developed cultivars of buffalo grass. It's not the straight native that are specifically designed to establish turf. There's a lot of varieties now, and those might be a little more aggressive when mixed in with the fescue. Chris?
I converted my front yard to no lawn during the drought years. And I mean, I guess, I live in East Lawrence, so that may help with the problem of people complaining that the things that I did, I lined all the sidewalks with monkey grass. And I try to make sure there are berries or flowers, several things at all times of the year. And I certainly have gotten a lot of positive comments. I've never had somebody stop me and complain, but I think if the flowers went there too, that, that are kind of staggered by season, I think was a really important.
One thing that's happening in Lawrence right now, if you all aren't aware, the development code is being updated. And now is the time for public comment. And one of the things that might be changing in there are weed ordinances.
Yay.
So we don't know yet what's happening, but it's something you can comment on in terms of weed ordinances. Yes.
All right, 2 questions. Somebody wants to know about what type of grass to plant in a shady area among many trees, less than 4 hours of sun a day.
That's your first comment.
Okay, so the pieces of advice for trying to grow grass under trees is you're either going to reseed it every year. Or what we recommend instead of doing that is planting a shade loving ground cover or mulch. So, and so there's lots of different shade growing ground covers. If they want to call the extension office, I'm happy to recommend shade loving ground covers. And that's going to be a better option than trying to repeatedly grow grass under. If they really, really want to try a grass type thing, a grass, not a sedge, but a grass under a tree, the fine fescues tend to work better than the tall fescue. Yes.
A number of years ago, thanks to some advice from Master Gardeners, I did a tapestry area, and it was quite lovely. I so enjoyed looking out the bay window down to the town. Until I purchased one plant, and it absolutely wiped out everything else. And it is also wiping out my lawn, and so it is creeping hard. And if you want nothing else growing there.
Okay. Okay, another recommendation for a no mow lawn. Charlie. Yeah.
Mostly about level ground.
Yes. Get the light.
I have a slope that goes into the woods, but the slope is only like 15 feet long, but I mean deep, but it's the length of the yard. And there's an erosion problem.
One thing I recommend, oh no, it was the little thing. Recommend with slopes is a cover crop. If you can plant a cover crop on that area while things are getting established, or at least use straw, sterile straw, not hay, on that slope while things are getting established, that will help with the erosion problem. A cover crop is ryegrass is often recommended as a cover crop. Sometimes when we're doing, when people are doing prairie vegetation seedings, there's a cover crop that comes with the mix. So if you were looking at an area, the covered area of a slope with a prairie vegetation mix that you would order online, you could look for one with a cover crop and plant that. And that would help with while the other plants, because it takes a while sometimes for these native plants to get established, especially from seed. So if you're going to plant, one of the things that when you're planting a meadow, an informal meadow, and you're using native grass and forb seed, the best time to plant that is December and January. Because the forb seeds, the wildflower seeds, not the grass, but the wildflower seeds need that freeze and thaw over winter in order to break dormancy. So you don't need that if you're just planting warm season grasses. You can plant those in the spring. But if you're doing a mix with wildflowers, you want to plant over the winter. And so that's when the sterile straw can come into play, or the cover on erosion. And sometimes if it's really steep, you can just also use erosion matting, so that it's designed specifically for those types of environments. Does that help?
So a hotline question comes up when you buy these seed mixes, and you last Monday gave me a handout, all the places you can buy prairie seed mixes. Do you remember that? Rebecca?
That one?
Yes.
Yes, this is in that publication, Plant Native Kansas, plantnativeks.org. There are some others that have come online since I put this together. So, but I'll be updating this over the next year. I've also found that that Taylor Creek Nurseries, they have the local Baldwin City native grower. They're a wholesaler, but what they have, I just found this out, they have actually conservation seed mixes for a variety of situations. And if you're willing to make a first-time minimum order of $500, you can get one of these bags of seed. I know it's expensive. So there's options for seeds and plants. Some of the bigger operations, like Sharp, Star, Fay Farm. So I have bigger bulk seed available. If you go to the conservation district, Douglas County Conservation District, they also have bulk seed that you can get if you're doing a larger area. If you want to go smaller boutique, there are a number of smaller operations that can put together smaller seed packets for you. You can mix your own, or you can plant plugs and start there. Yes.
Okay, so I have already started turfing my yard. So like, should I till the dead grass, or I'm not sure, like, because there's a little bit of dead grass left over underneath. I don't know if I should till it, how I should get dead grass like this.
Well, how big? So you've already tarped it from last year?
I started in November. And
okay.
I'm just doing section by section. But
so if it's a small enough section and you're not on a slope, you can pull that tarp up and rake off that dead grass. Is it too big an area to do that?
pretty big, yeah.
Okay, because one of the things that if you till that ground, what's going to happen is all those weed seeds that were there are going to be exposed to the light, and then you're going to have a whole new crop of weeds. So that is one of these. So what you can do about that, though, is sometimes that's an advantage. So certainly with prairie reconstruction, sometimes what we recommend is you go ahead and you disc that up, maybe not till it, because disking is a more shallow disturbance. Is if you do that a few times, so once that new weed growth comes up, you kill that, and then the more seeds come up, and then you kill that again, and then you exhaust the seed supply there. So you can do that over the course of this next growing season, is continually, or you can try not to disturb the soil as much, and then plant by just doing the raking, the lightly raking, and then planting.
And if it's pretty well on its way, if you take a weed eater to it and just use the weed eater almost like a broom and chop up all that stuff, you can then go with a blower and just blow it off, and then you'll just have basically bare dirt with some sprigs of things, but you're not disturbing the soil as much, so you're less likely to unearth the seeds, and you're not disturbing the mycorrhiza and other good things about undisturbed soil.
One of the things you want to avoid is continually tilling your soil. Because then that just destroys the soil structure.
We have one more question.
Yeah.
I'd like- There. All right. When making a bee-friendly lawn, would there be any concerns, suggestions for areas that are heavily used or trafficked?
That is one of the limitations of a bee lawn. Is most of the plants, some of them can take some traffic. And there might be some suggestions from this group about what could take some more traffic, but most of these plants that I've been talking about don't take as much, it's not a recreation area. That's where I recommend that if you need an area where there's gonna be a lot of traffic, there's gonna be some recreation, that's where you have your tall fescue grass. And then, but shrink that to what you need, and then plant the rest in something that's more bee friendly. Now, and I'll just toss it out to the group. Are there any plants in your experience that could actually take a little bit of traffic?
What about the plant?
Plantains, yeah.
Are they good for pollinate? Because I mean,
Yeah.
they're.
Yeah.
They're
Yes,
in a lot of disturbed areas.
right. So they're under the category of things we usually think of as weeds and we're
Yeah.
trying to get rid of. But they can take traffic through, they're mowable. But they do support pollinators while you allow them to flower. So fine fescues can take a little bit of traffic, but not much. I know what was the other thing? Liriope can take some traffic, vinca can take some traffic. That's another one. Susan? Okay. Okay, Antonaria. That's a lovely little ground cover. One of the things that I didn't mention that isn't something that really helps with weed issues, so you don't have to use so much mulch, is what's called matrix planting. So you plant a ground cover, something that's sort of mid-level and then a taller thing, and you plant them more densely than you would typically in a formal garden. And that allows, so I've got pussy toes, Antonaria, both the Plantagenifolia and the neglecta, which is native, in an area, and they just cover the ground. And then I've got taller plants on top of that. So sort of, I think they call it matrix planting. And so that's an option where you can kind of reduce the weeding that might come with new gardens. So that's just a couple suggestions. Yes.
Invasive plants. I have a section of my yard
Mhm,
that has been neglected,
mhm.
okay? And I've got honeysuckle, which I've left there because it helps against the road.
Mhm.
Is that one of those, rip it up yesterday kind of thing? Is there any value in honeysuckle?
The bush honeysuckle, I would have to say no. It is so invasive. It is so invasive.
Unless you
So
like
that's the-
mosquitoes.
So, there's a number of options that are available depending on how much you have and how much you want to get rid of. But I would, the best thing, if you've got small invading, no, okay. So you can try to pull it out when it's wet, like after it rains. It's for those of you who have smaller infestations, it's really kind of easy to pull up, especially when the ground is moist, to get rid of that bush honeysuckle. If not, then there's actually foliar sprays, and then there's stump treatment, because if you cut it, it just comes back. I mean, it's just going to sprout up again. So you either have to stump treat it with an herbicide or a foliar spray to get rid of it. But no, I don't recommend keeping it around. So there's lots of pictures over there of a variety of plants. And you can see what I've done to my yard over there. Does anybody have any more questions? No, great. Well, thank you for your attention.